بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أرحب بكم في هذا الكورس. أنا الدكتور عبد الحكيم عكور، طبيب وأستاذ مشارك في قسم الصحة العامة وطب المجتمع في كلية الطب. هذا الكورس كما سبق وأشار زميلي الدكتور محمد الشياب وكذلك الزملاء اللاحقين هي عبارة عن سلسلة من المحاضرات ستوضح كل ما يتعلق بالريسيرش، وأنا سأقوم بتوضيح الإثكس واللي هو أيضا البلاجيريزم والسايتيشن. So, let's begin. Ethics in research. All ethical principles are applied in research. طبعا الethical principles اللي تعلمناها في الإثكس اللي بتتعلق بالrespect of autonomy، احترام ذاتية الإنسان وأخلاقه ومبادئه، والنون-مالفيسنس اللي هو عدم إيذائه، والبينيفيسنس اللي هي التعهد بمنفعة هذا الإنسان اللي بده يشترك في الريسيرش، وأيضا justice اللي هو قضية العدل ومحاولة أن تكون عادل في كل ما تقوم به من نواحي هذا الريسيرش. So, if we define the research or research ethics, research ethics provides guidelines for the responsible conduct of biomedical research. كل ما يتعلق بالميديكال بيولوجيكال biomedical research هذه أخلاقيات الكوندكت of research في هذه المجالات. In addition, research ethics educates and monitors scientists conducting research to ensure a high ethical standards. So, why study research ethics? By knowing what constitutes ethical research is important for all people who conduct research projects or use and apply the results from research findings. طبعا لازم منظومة الأخلاق تنطبق بشكل كبير جدا على الريسيرش، على البحث العلمي. يجب أن يكون هناك إطار مفصل بتفاصيل دقيقة بكل ما يتعلق بهذا الريسيرش. So, research is a public trust that must be ethically conducted, trustworthy, and socially responsible if the results are to be valuable. طبعا حتى نثق بهذا الريسيرش it should be ethically conducted. All parts of a research project, from the project design to submission of the results for peer review اللي هي انه يقيم من قبل زملاء اخصائيين، must be upstanding to be considered ethical. Upstanding يعني تصل إلى الستاندرد الممتاز. When even one part of a research project is questionable or conducted unethically, the integrity of the entire project is called into question. So we have to do all parts ethically without any bias or without any intention or unintention to do bias in the research. All researchers should be familiar with the basic ethical principles and have to date knowledge about policies and procedures designed to ensure the safety of research subjects and to prevent sloppy or irresponsible research. Because ignorance of policies designed to protect research subjects is not considered a viable excuse for ethically questionable project. فبالتالي ignorance of policies or I didn't know sloppy irresponsible research هذه مش حجج these are not excuses to conduct a sloppy not good research. Therefore, the duty lies with the researcher to seek out and fully understand the policies and theories designed to guarantee upstanding research practice. طبعا في تاريخ الهيستوري اللي مر في الإثيكس الريسيرش مر عبر محطات. من هذه المحطات ما يسمى نوربرغ كود اللي قامت على أو تبعت سلسلة من المحاكمات التي قامت على محاكمة أناس قاموا بمجموعة من الريسيرش اللي بنسميه unethical research. So it is a statement limiting permissible medical experimentations or experimentation in human subjects. According to this statement, a human experimentation is justified only if its results benefit society and it is carried out in accord with basic principles that satisfy moral, ethical, and legal concepts. طبعا نورنبرغ هذا مكان المحاكمات اللي صار في أمريكا بعد ما صار في مجموعة من as I said a group of unethical conducted research. So Nuremberg Code consists of 10 basic ethical principles or guidelines as follows. Research participants must voluntarily consent to research participation, respect of autonomy, consent. Research aims should contribute to the good of the society. Research must be based on sound theory and prior animal testing. Research must avoid unnecessary physical and mental suffering. No research project can go forward where serious injury and or death are potential outcomes. The degree of risk taken with research participants cannot exceed participated benefits or results. Proper environment and protection for participants is necessary. Experiments can be conducted only by scientifically qualified persons. Human subjects must be allowed to discontinue their participation at any time, and research must be terminated if continuation will result in injury or death. As I said, these 10 basic ethical principles originated from as a result of conducting an ethical research. So when you notice or see an ethically conducted research, you have to put some guidelines, and these were results of that. Let's go also talk about the World Medical Association WMA Declaration of Helsinki, which is about ethical principles for medical research involving human subjects. Include the necessity of using an independent investigator to review potential research projects, someone who is not involved or not in a relationship or knowing the authors. Employing a medically qualified person to supervise the research and assume responsibility for the health and welfare of human subjects. As you see, many of these guidelines are concerned with the health and welfare of human subjects. The importance of preserving the accuracy of research results. No falsification, no fabrication. Suggestions on how to obtain informed consent from research participants. Rules concerning research with children and mentally incompetent persons, evaluating and using experimental treatments on patients. The importance of determining which medical situations and conditions are appropriate and safe for research. Okay, Helsinki Declaration, we will go in details by Helsinki Declaration. First, Helsinki Declaration includes general principles. It is about Declaration of Geneva of the World Medical Association binds the physician with the words, "The health of my patients will be my first consideration," and the International Code of Medical Ethics declares that a physician shall act in the patient's best interest when providing medical care. So هذه أيضا الدeclaration about for medical research, لكن in the same time it goes also for the ethics in medical practice. So second, it is the duty of the physician to promote and safeguard the health, well-being and rights of patients, including those who are involved in medical research. Physicians' knowledge and conscience are dedicated to the fulfillment of this duty. No harm should be done to any participants. Medical progress is based on research that ultimately must include studies involving human subjects. The primary purpose of medical research involving a human subject is to understand the causes, development, and effects of diseases and improve preventive, diagnostic, and therapeutic interventions, methods, procedures, treatments. Even the best proven interventions must be evaluated continually through research for their safety, effectiveness, efficiency, accessibility, and quality. So this is very important purpose of medical research, to understand the causes, development, effect of disease, even for the proven interventions must be evaluated continually. Also, medical research is subject to ethical standards that promote and ensure respect for all human subjects, protect their health and rights. هذا المبدأ بتكرر ولكنه باستمرار هو مهم جدا حتى ما يتنصل أحد من حقوق المشاركين. While the primary purpose of medical research is to generate new knowledge, this goal can never take precedence over the rights and interests of individual research subjects. It is the duty of physicians who are involved in medical research to protect the life, health, dignity, integrity, right to self-determination, privacy, confidentiality, personal information of research subjects. All these are to be protected. Responsibility for the protection of research subjects must always rest with the physician or other healthcare professionals and never with the research subjects, even though they have given consent. So this protection is a very big responsibility, should be always as obligation be committed at. Physicians must consider the ethical, legal, and regulatory norms and standards for research involving human subjects in their own countries, as well as applicable international norms and standards. No national or international ethical, legal, or regulatory requirements should reduce or eliminate any of the protections for research subjects set forth in this declaration. That means it should give more restrictions, not to limit subjects or participants' rights at all costs. Medical research should be conducted in a manner that minimizes possible harm to the environment, and this is also very important. Non-maleficence. Medical research involving human subjects must be conducted only by individuals with the appropriate ethics and scientific education, training, and qualifications. Research on patients or healthy volunteers requires the supervision of a competent and proper and appropriately qualified physicians or other healthcare professionals. So if anyone going to do a research must be qualified. Groups that are underrepresented in medical research should be provided appropriate access to participation in research. Sometimes these groups are ignored, so they should get appropriate access. Physicians who combine medical research with medical care should involve their patients in research only to the extent that this is justified by its potential preventive, diagnostic, or therapeutic value, and if the physician has good reason to believe that participation in the research study will not adversely affect the health of the patients who serve as research subjects. So the main purpose, the main objective when involving patients in research, potential preventive, diagnostic, therapeutic, be ensured. Appropriate compensation and treatment for subjects who are harmed cause of participating in research must be ensured. طبعا المبدأ انه no harm، لكن اذا صار any harm they should be compensated. المبدأ الثاني اللي هو risks, burdens and benefits. In medical practice and in medical research, most interventions involve risks and burdens. هناك خطورة وتبعات. Medical research involving human subjects may only be conducted if the importance of the objective outweighs the risks and burdens of the research subject. It goes beyond saying. All medical research involving human subjects must be preceded by careful assessment of predictable risks and burdens to the individuals and groups involved in the research in comparison with foreseeable benefits to them and to other individuals or groups affected by the condition under investigation. So we cannot guarantee no risk, but careful assessment of predictable risk. Many of the procedures have risks. Many of the treatments have risks and burden. So if you are introducing new technology, a new treatment, whatever, you have to understand that there is a risk, there is a burden, and minimize the risk and the burden. Measures to minimize the risk must be implemented. The risk must be continuously monitored, assessed, and documented by the researcher. As I said, when you introduce technology or intervention or any kind of a new thing that you need to assess by involving patients or volunteers, you have to understand that you need to minimize the risk by what? Continuously monitoring, assessing, and documenting. Physicians may not be involved in a research study involving human subjects unless they are confident that the risks have been adequately assessed and can be satisfactorily managed. Otherwise, if you are not sure that the risk is minimized or under control, it is a big mistake to conduct such research. When the risks are found to outweigh potential benefits or when there is conclusive proof of definitive outcomes, physicians must assess whether to continue, modify, or immediately stop the study because it's causing harm. Vulnerable groups and individuals. Some groups and individuals are particularly vulnerable. يعني بعض هؤلاء الناس, they are really vulnerable and they may have an increased likelihood of being wronged or of incurring additional harm. These vulnerable subjects or people needs attention. The World Medical Association proposed that persons are vulnerable because of a reduced ability to provide informed consent. Some research populations are particularly vulnerable and need special protection. These include those who cannot give or cannot refuse consent for themselves, and include those who may be vulnerable to coercion or undue influence. سواء كان الإنسان اللي قدرته على التمييز غير كافي وبحاجة إلى مرافق، أو الطفل أو ما شابه ذلك، أو المريض اللي في حالة غيبوبة، أو كل هذه نسميهم vulnerable groups or individuals. All vulnerable groups and individuals should receive specifically considered protection. Research with such groups is only justified if the research is responsive to the health needs or priorities of this group. Also, should stand on benefit from the knowledge, practices, or interventions that result from such research. المبدأ اللي بعده scientific requirements and research protocols. Medical research involving human subjects must conform to generally accepted scientific principles, be based on a thorough knowledge of the scientific literature, other relevant resources of information, and adequate laboratory and appropriate animal experimentation. The welfare also of animals used must be respected. فهذا scientific requirement اللي هو accepted scientific principles, thorough knowledge of the scientific literature, relevant resources of information, and so on. The design and performance of each research study involving human subjects must be clearly described and justified in a research protocol. The protocol should contain a statement of the ethical considerations involved and should indicate how the principles in this declaration have been addressed. Protocol should include information regarding funding, sponsors, institutional affiliations, potential conflicts of interest, incentives for subjects, and information regarding provisions for treating and or compensating subjects who are harmed because of participation in the research study. In clinical trials, the protocol must also describe appropriate arrangements for post-trial provisions. So these are scientific requirements for research protocols. The Ethics Committee. A research protocol must be submitted for consideration, comment, guidance, and approval to a research ethics committee before the study begins. It goes beyond saying also this is absolutely must. This committee must be transparent in its functioning, must be independent of the researcher, the sponsor, and any other undue influence, and must be duly qualified. It must take into consideration the laws and regulations of the country or countries in which the research is to be performed, as well as applicable international norms and standards, but these must not be allowed to reduce or eliminate any of the protections for research subjects set forth in this declaration. So هذه الكوميتي لها مهام كبيرة جدا و functioning independent researchers من sponsors also من and duly qualified. The committee must have the right to monitor ongoing studies. The researcher must provide monitoring information to the committee, especially information about any serious adverse events. No amendment to the protocol may be made without consideration and approval by the committee. After the end of the study, the researchers must submit a final report to the committee containing a summary of the study's findings and conclusions. The other also principle, privacy and confidentiality. Every precaution must be taken to protect the privacy of research subjects and the confidentiality of their personal information. Participation by individuals capable of giving informed consent as subjects in medical research must be voluntary. This is about the informed consent, which is a very big issue in research and in medical practice. No individual capable of giving informed consent may be enrolled in research unless he or she freely agrees. That's what we call voluntarily. In medical research involving human subjects capable of giving informed consent, each potential subject must be adequately informed of the aims, methods, source of funding, possible conflict of interest, institutional affiliations of the researcher, the anticipated benefits and potential risk of the study, and the discomfort it may entail, post-study provisions, and any other relevant aspects of the study. هذه معلومات. That's why we call it informed consent. The potential subject must be informed of the right to refuse to participate in the study or to withdraw consent to participate at any time without reprisal. Special attention should be given to the specific information needs of individual potential subjects as well as to the methods used to deliver the information. So this is a very sensitive matter. After ensuring that the potential subject has understood the information, the physician or another appropriately qualified individual must then seek the potential subject's freely given informed consent, preferably in writing. If the consent cannot be expressed in writing, the non-written consent must be formally documented and witnessed as much as possible. All medical research subjects should be given the option of being informed about the general outcome and result of this study. A lot of information to be given. When seeking informed consent for participation in a research study, the physician must be particularly cautious if the potential subject is in a dependent relationship with the physician or may consent under force. In such situations, informed consent must be sought by an appropriately qualified individual who is completely independent of this relationship. نقطة مهمة أيضا. The person who is incapable of giving informed consent, the physician must seek informed consent from the legally authorized representative, المرافق. These individuals must not be included in a research study that has no likelihood of benefit for them unless it is intended to promote the health of the group represented by the potential subject. Also, the research cannot instead be performed with persons capable of providing informed consent, and the research entails only minimal risk and minimal burden. إذن research cannot be performed with persons capable of providing informed consent، لأنه إذا ما كنتش قادر تعطي هذا الريسيرش للجماعة اللي هم capable of providing informed consent، إذن بده يكون only minimal risk and minimal burden. When a potential research subject who is deemed incapable of giving informed consent can give assent to decisions about participation in research, the physician must seek that assent in addition to the consent of the legally authorized representative. The potential subject's dissent should be respected. Physically or mentally incapable of giving consent. Unconscious patients may be done only consent if the physical or mental condition that prevents giving informed consent is a necessary characteristic. فبالتالي in such circumstances the physician must seek informed consent from the legally authorized representative. If no such representative is available, research cannot be delayed. Study must proceed without informed consent, provided that the specific reasons for involving such subjects with a condition that renders them unable to give informed consent have been stated in the research protocol and the study has been approved by a research ethics committee. هذا يجب أن يوضح أيضا. Consent to remain in the research must be obtained as soon as possible from the subjects or a legally authorized representative. Also, the physician must fully inform the patient with which aspects of their care and are related to the research. Refusal of a patient to participate or patient's decision to withdraw from this must never affect the patient-physician relationship. يعني رفض إنه يستمر، هذا مش لازم يأثر على علاقة هذا المريض بالطبيب. For medical research using identifiable human materials or data, such as research on material or data contained in biobanks or similar repositories, physicians must seek informed consent for its collection, storage, and use. There may be exceptional situations where consent would be impossible. Such research. In such situations, the research may be done only after consideration and approval of a research ethics committee. هذه حقوق، يعني حتى هذه الماتيريال سواء كانت جلد ولا anything that are bio, that's why they call it biobanks, hair ولا whatever، كل هذا المفروض انه يكون في له consent or research ethics committee. نيجي لموضوع آخر اللي هو use of placebo. The benefits والrisk والburdens والeffectiveness of a new intervention must be tested against those of the best proven interventions ما عدا في هذه الحالات. Except where no proven interventions exist, the use of placebo or no intervention is acceptable, or where for compelling and scientifically sound methodological reasons, the use of any intervention less effective than the best proven one, the use of placebo or no intervention is necessary to determine the efficacy or safety of an intervention. And the patients who receive any intervention less effective than the best proven one, placebo, or no intervention will not be subject to additional risk of serious or irreversible harm because of not receiving the best proven intervention. Extreme care must be taken to avoid abuse of this option اللي هو البلاسيبو. انه انت بتقدرش تعطيه لمريض يستحق ان ياخذ دواء. تسجيل الريسيرش والpublication والdissemination. Every research study involving human subject must be registered, publicly accessible database before recruitment of the first subject. Researchers, authors, sponsors, editors, publishers all have ethical obligations regarding the publication and dissemination. So it's a duty of researcher to make publicly available the results of such research, and they should be accountable for the completeness and accuracy of the report. All parties, المشرفين, they should accept the guidelines for ethical reporting. Negative and inconclusive as well as positive results must be published or otherwise made publicly available. Sources of funding, affiliations, conflicts of interest, everything should be declared. Unproven interventions in clinical practice. أحيانا بيكون التريتمنت where proven interventions do not exist or other known interventions have been ineffective. The physician, after seeking expert advice with informed consent from the patient or legally authorized representative, may use an unproven intervention if the physician's judgment it offers hope of saving life, re-establishing health, alleviating suffering. هذا طبعا بموافقة المريض، بس على شرط انه يكون في evaluation للsafety والefficacy. New information must be recorded and where appropriate made publicly available. نيجي الآن ل American Medical Association Principle of Medical Ethics for Research، تقريبا مشابهة إلها لكن نمر عليها بشكل سريع. Physician involvement in research. نتكلم الآن عن إنه لما الطبيب يمشي أو يشتغل في الريسيرش. Biomedical and health research is intended to contribute to the advancement of knowledge, a society of future patients rather than the two specific benefits of the researcher himself or herself. However, Research involving human participants should be conducted in a manner minimize risk, avoid necessary suffering, depends on the willingness of participants to accept risk. They must be able to make informed decision. As I said, many of this will be a little bit similar to the Helsinki declaration. Physicians, actually, it is based on that. Physician researchers share their responsibility for the ethical conduct of research with the institution that carries out research. Obligation, the institution to oversee the design, conduct, dissemination of research. The IRB also, as well as the individual research, should ensure that each participant has been appropriately informed. To fulfill these obligations, individual physicians who are involved in research should participate only in those studies have relevant expertise, ensure that voluntary consent being obtained, prospective participants receive the information they need. Physicians make all reasonable efforts to ensure that understand the research is not intended to benefit them individually. Physicians also make clear that individual may refuse to participate, assure themselves that the research protocol is scientifically sound, meets ethical guidelines, demonstrate the same and concern for the the same care and concern for the well-being of research participants. Also should advocate for access to experimental interventions. Be mindful of conflicts of interest and assure themselves that appropriate safeguards are in place to protect the integrity of the research. Adhere to rigorous scientific and ethical standards. Also, about the informed consent, essential safeguard in research to obtain informed consent, respect of persons, and the desire to respect autonomy of the individual deciding whether to volunteer to participate in biomedical or health research. For these reasons, no person may be used as a subject research against his or her will. So, physicians must ensure that participants has given voluntary informed consent, with certain exceptions to be valid. Informed consent requires that the individual have the capacity to provide consent and have sufficient understanding of the subject matter involved to form a decision. So this is an individual consent that must be protected. Informed consent in research. A valid consent process includes asserting that the individual has decision-making capacity, as we said before, understanding or competent, reviewing the process and any materials to ensure that it is understandable, disclosing the nature of the experimental drugs, devices, procedures, any conflicts of interests, any non-risk or foreseeable hazards, pain, discomfort, likelihood of therapeutic direct benefit, uh, alternative course of action, including choosing standard or no treatment instead, nature of the research plan, difference between the physician's responsibilities as a researcher and as the patient's treating physician. Answering questions the prospective participant has, refraining from persuading the individual to enroll, avoiding encouraging unrealistic expectations, documenting the individual's voluntary consent. Uh, Also, consent is given by individual legally authorized representative if the person incompetent, and prudent adults would reasonably be expected to volunteer themselves. or their children in research. Participant gives his or her assent to participation. Where possible, physicians should respect the refusal of an individual who lacks decision-making capacity. Potential for individuals to benefit from the study in certain situations with special safeguards in keeping with ethics guidance. Obligation to obtain informed consent may be waived in research on emergency interventions, of course. Study design and sampling. To be ethically justifiable, biomedical and health research that involves human subjects must uphold fundamental principles of respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. These principles apply not only to the conduct of research, but equally to the selection of research topics and study design. So, well-designed, ethically sound research aligns with the goals of medicine, addresses questions relevant to the population among whom the study will be carried out, balances the potential for benefit against the potential for harm, employs study design that will yield scientifically valid and significant data, and guarantees useful knowledge, or excuse me, generates useful knowledge. For example, research to develop biological or chemical weapons is anti-ethical to the goals of the medical profession, whereas research to develop defenses against such weapons can be ethically justifiable. Physicians who engage in biomedical or health research with the human participants thus have an ethical obligation to ensure that any study with which they are involved and consistent with the goals and fundamental values of medical profession, addresses research questions that will contribute meaningfully to medical knowledge and practice, scientifically well designed to yield valid data to answer the research question, include using appropriate population, sampling controls, clear appropriate inclusion, exclusion criteria, statistically sound plan for data collection, analysis, appropriate controls, applicable criteria for discontinuing the study. كل هذه الأمور المفروض يكون واضحة clear appropriate في السامبلينج وفي الديزاين. Also procedures to minimize risk to participants, risk associated with recruitment and data collection activities without compromising scientific integrity. Provides mechanisms to safeguard confidentiality, does not disproportionately recruit participants from historically disadvantaged populations or populations whose ability to provide fully voluntary consent is compromised. هذا خطأ يقع به كثير من الباحثين يدوروا على الأسهل وبالتالي يقعوا في خطأ اللي هو misrepresentation of the population. Participants who otherwise meet inclusion-exclusion criteria should be recruited without regard to race, ethnicity, gender, or economic status. ما يكونش هذه الأمور هي البيز. Recruits participants who lack the capacity to give informed consent only when the study stands on to benefit such a class of participants. And with capacity would not yield valid results. In this event, assent should be sought from the participant and consent should be obtained from the prospective participants legally authorized representative in keeping with ethics guidelines. Also, has been reviewed by, and approved by oversight bodies. نيجي لإشي اسمه conflict of interest in research. Uh, Increasing numbers of physicians within and outside the academic health centers are becoming involved in partnership with industry to conduct biomedical and health research. As they do so, physicians must be mindful of the conflict such engagement poses to the integrity of the research and the welfare of human participants. In addition to financial conflicts of interest created by incentives to conduct trials and recruit subjects, physicians must be sensitive to the differing roles of clinicians and investigators, which may require them to balance dual commitments to participants and science. هذا طبعا في الأبحاث التي تمثل شركات الدواء أو تمثل أشخاص أو مؤسسات معينة هي التي تقوم بإجراء هذا البحث. This conflict of commitment is particularly acute when a physician investigator has treated or continues to treat a patient, who is eligible to enroll as a person in clinical trials the physician is conducted. Minimizing and mitigating conflicts of interest in clinical research is imperative if the medical community is to justify and maintain trust في الميديكال ريسيرش community. دائما في الببليكيشن في الجورنالز بيسألوا هذا السؤال انه هل هناك any conflict of interest؟ conflict of interest يعني على الأغلب بيكون إنه زي ما حكيت اللي هو affiliation with or receiving funds or something like that, financial conflicts, and so on. Physicians who engage in this should decline financial compensation that awards more than a physician's research efforts and does not reflect their market value. Physicians should not accept payment solely for referring patients to research studies. هذا corruption. Ensure that the research protocol includes provision for funding participants' medical care in the event of complications, and should not double bill third-party payer for additional expenses. كل هذه لها علاقة ب conflict of interest. As part of the informed consent process, disclose to prospective participants the nature and source of funding. هذا disclosure اللي هو إعطاء المعلومات should be included in any written consent material. Avoid engaging in any research where there is an understanding that limitations can be placed on the presentation or publication of results by the research sponsor. Refrain from knowingly participating in financial relationship with the commercial entity with whom they have a research relationship until the research relationship ends and the research results have been published or otherwise disseminated to the public. أيضا هذه من القواعد. Disclose material ties to companies whose products they are investigating or other ties that create real or perceived conflicts of interest to institutions, organizations, funding, any journal or publication, physicians who have also leadership roles in institutions, conduct biomedical research, that fund research with the human person should promote and develop the development of guidelines on conflict of interest. Misconduct. Biomedical research is intended to advance medical knowledge to benefit future patients. To achieve these or those goals, physicians who are involved in research maintain high standards of professionalism and scientific integrity. With oversight responsibility, physicians in biomedical or health research have responsibility to ensure that allegations of scientific misconduct are addressed promptly and fairly. They should ensure that procedures to resolve such allegations do not damage the science. يعني في اتهامات بأنه في تزوير، في اتهامات إنه misconduct, this research is scientifically invalid, or it involves invalid methods and so on. So your procedures to resolve this allegation or these allegations do not damage science, resolve charges expeditiously, treat all parties fairly, justly, integrity of the process, and so maintain accurate documentation, maintain highest degree of confidentiality, appropriate action to discharge responsibilities to all individuals involved. الآن ما هي principles في disseminating research results? Physicians have an ethical responsibility to learn from and contribute to the total store of scientific knowledge. إذن هي obligation إنه والله to disseminate. When they engage in biomedical or health research, physicians have obligations as scientists, which include disseminating research findings. إذن هؤلاء scientific peers will publication of research funding foundation to good medical care، والمفروض إنه يصير في توزيع أو تعميم لهذه المعلومات. To fulfill this responsibility, a physician should advocate for timely and transparent dissemination of research data or results, report the results of research accurately, including subsequent negative. If your hypothesis is to prove something, but it proved the opposite, you have to report whatever the findings are in your research. Also, commitment to peer review, disclose sponsorship, are responsible in their release of research results to the media. Misuse of research results could affect the decision about when and whether to disseminate research. The physician should assess foreseeable ramifications of the research in an effort to balance the promise of benefit against potential harms from corrupt application. نيجي للجين ثيرابي والجينيتيك engineering. Gene therapy involves the replacement or modification of genetic variant to restore or enhance cellular function or improve response to non-genetic therapies. So, genetic engineering involves the use of recombinant DNA techniques to introduce new characteristics or traits. In medicine, the goal of gene therapy and genetic engineering is to alleviate human suffering and disease. وبالتالي مع كل الثيرابيز الموجودة, this goal should be pursued only within the ethical traditions of the profession, which gives primacy to the welfare of the patient. So, genetic manipulation should be reserved for therapeutic purpose only. Efforts to enhance desirable characteristics or to improve complex human traits are contrary to the ethical tradition of medicine. Because of the potential of abuse, genetic manipulation of non-disease traits or the eugenic development of offspring may never be justifiable. Moreover, genetic manipulation can carry risk to both individuals into whom modified genetic material is introduced and to future generations. So, somatic cell gene therapy targets non-germ cells and thus does not carry risk to future generations. Germline therapy, in which a genetic modification is introduced into the genome of human gametes, or their precursors is intended to result in the expression of the modified gene in the recipient's offspring and subsequent generations. Germline therapy, thus, may be associated with increased risk and the possibility of unpredictable and irreversible results, adversely affect the welfare of subsequent generations. Thus, in addition to fundamental ethical requirements for the appropriate conduct of research with the human participants, research with gene therapy or genetic engineering must put in place additional safeguards to vigorously protect the safety and well-being of participants and future generations. It's not a game. It's not I can do whatever. There are so many safeguards vigorously protect safety well-being. So, physicians should not engage in research involving gene therapy or genetic engineering with a human participant unless the following conditions are met. Experience with animal studies is sufficient to assure that experimental interventions will be safe and effective. No other suitable, effective therapies are available. Gene therapy is restricted to somatic cell interventions in light of the far-reaching implications of germline interventions. Evaluation of the effectiveness of the intervention includes determination of reaching implications of germline interventions. Evaluation of the effectiveness of the intervention include determination of the natural history of the disease or condition under study and follow-up examination. Research minimizes risks to participants. Special attention paid to informed consent. And so the physician should be aware that gene therapy and genetic engineering intervention may require additional scientific and ethical review, regulatory oversight before they are introduced into clinical practice. Needle stem cell research. Human stem cells are widely seen as offering a source of potential treatment for a range of diseases and are thus the subject of much research. Clinical studies have validated the use of adult stem cells in a limited number of therapies, but have yet to confirm the utility of embryonic stem cells. Physicians who conduct research using the stem cells obtained from any source, umbilical cord, embryos, must, at minimum, adhere to IRB's requirements. Ensure that research is carried out with appropriate monitoring oversight, research carried out with appropriate informed consent, disclose the risk minimum consent disclosure, should address the donor of cells to be used in stem cell research, the process by which stem cell be obtained, specificality, whether an immortal cell line will result, and primary and anticipated secondary uses. For a recipient, the types of tissue from which the stem cells derived, unique risks posed by investigational stem cell products, such as tumor genesis, immunological reactions, unpredictable behavior of cells, long-term health effects. أيضا الprofessional community as well as the public remains divided about the use of embryonic for therapeutic purpose stem cells. Conflict regarding research which embryonic stem cells centers on the moral status of embryos, question that divides ethical opinion and that cannot be resolved by medical science. regardless whether they are obtained from embryos donated by individuals or couples undergoing in vitro fertilization, or from cloned embryos created by somatic cell nuclear transfer. Use of embryonic stem cells currently requires the destruction of human embryo from which the stem cells derive. So the moral vision that underlies this debate must be respected. Participation in research involving embryonic stem cells requires respect for embryos, research participants, donors, recipients. These stem cells and research does not violate the ethical standards of the profession. Every physician remains free to decide whether to participate or not, should continue to be guided by their commitment, welfare of the patients. And physicians who use embryonic stem cells should be able to justify the risk for the subjects and so on. Commercial use of human biological materials, and such as a human biological materials, should disclose potential commercial applications to the tissue donor before a profit is realized. Either informed consent to use biological materials, share profits from commercial use of human biological material with the tissue donor. Physicians must make diagnostic and treatment recommendations keeping with standards with medical practice. So let's talk also about some issues as issues. We call them issues. Authorship. What is authorship? Is the process of deciding whose names belong on a research paper. Plagiarism. The second part, or the second lecture, is about plagiarism, but here is the act of passing of somebody else's ideas, thoughts, pictures, theories, words, or stories as your own. Peer review is a process in which an author or authors submit a written manuscript or article to a journal for publication, and the journal editors distributes the article to experts working in the same similar scientific discipline. Conflict of interest, we talked about that, when persons or organizations' obligations to a particular research project conflict with their personal interests or obligations. Data management in respect to research ethics references three issues. The ethical and truthful collection of reliable data, we talked about that. The ownership and the responsibility of collected data, and retaining data and sharing access to collected data with colleagues and the public. These are data management issues. Research misconduct is defined as fabrication, falsification, plagiarism in proposing, performing, reviewing research, or in reporting research results, while fabrication is making up data. يعني ما في بالأصل هذه المعلومات كلها كذب. Making up data or results and recording or reporting them. Falsification is manipulating research materials, equipment, or processes, or changing or omitting data or results such as that research is not accurately represented in the research record. ويتبع بعد ذلك اللي هو محاضرة عن البلاجيرزم. يعطيكم العافية.